The question we have to ask ourselves is, who are we accountable for? We will not be asked about every single poor person all around the world, but we will be asked about those people who are struggling on our own doorstep.
Hello close shavers, good morning. We've got Iqbal Naseem here from the National Zakat Foundation, and he's going to break down to us what NZF is all about. I've been curious myself. Is it a worthy organisation for us to give to? What's the purpose and the objectives?
Cool.
Welcome.
So the National Zakat Foundation is all about collecting and distributing zakat funds within the United Kingdom. So we're the only organisation in the country that focuses on zakat, number one, and number two, that actually uses all of its funds within the UK.
We have areas where our parents come from, like Pakistan, Somalia, Yemen, Bangladesh. There's a lot of poverty there, right? And they're more need of people here.
Yes, it's very simple, to be honest. So number one is that zakat is not charity. Zakat in principle belongs where you live. So your zakat belongs here just as much as you belong here, right? So we need to distinguish between zakat and charity, or sadaqah if you like, right? Within the UK, there are thousands of Muslims within our community that are living in very, very, very difficult circumstances. And so the question we have to ask ourselves is, from an accountability perspective, who are we accountable for? We will not be asked about every single poor person all around the world, but we will be asked about those people who are struggling on our own doorstep, right? And I have seen, and we've dealt with over 7,000 cases, right, in the last few years of individuals in our community who are really, really, really struggling. And some of the situations I've dealt with myself, they are close to third world. And people may find that difficult to understand, but you have people on the verge of suicide, on the verge of leaving their faith altogether, abandoning their community, because they're really, really struggling, sometimes going from mosque to mosque, hoping for some support, hoping for some food or whatever, and getting abandoned. So we're trying to fill that gap.
So has homelessness become a big issue amongst the Muslim community?
Of course, it's a massive issue. Poverty, homelessness, these are huge issues in the UK in general, which are only growing. And the Muslim community is actually disproportionately affected by these. In fact, a study that was done a couple of years back, and there was a conference I attended in relation to this, said that a Muslim in the UK is more than twice as likely as any other person from another faith group to be in poverty in the UK.
Okay, but not to sound ignorant, but we live in a system where we have benefits, we have free housing. How do they not enjoy that same right, like every other citizen?
If the system was so perfect, why last year was 1 million meals served in food banks? Why would 1 million meals in the UK be served in food banks? Why are there people literally now? I mean, I live and work in London. There is not a day that goes by that you will find people on the streets, sleeping on the streets. Why is that the case? What about refugees and asylum seekers? 95% of asylum seekers in the country are from Muslim countries, and they have just over £30 a week given to live on. How are they supposed to live?
But isn't it the case also that traditionally we've given back home, to Muslim lands, but they're heavily reliant on our distribution of zakat or sadaqah, for example?
No, fine. So give sadaqah. I'm not saying don't give sadaqah. Okay. But the question is, this whole question of home, where is home, is now the burning question.
Precisely.
The reality is 60% of Muslims in the UK are 25 or below. For them, the definition of home, I think, is quite different to maybe, let's say, our parents' generation, right? Their idea of home is a different thing now. The UK is our home. This is where our children, our grandchildren grow up. So as a community, in order to strengthen our community, our zakat belongs where we live. But in terms of our sadaqah and other charity, we can decide to give that wherever we like.
Right.
So I think it's about balance.
I was going to ask you that, because you distinguish between zakat and sadaqah.
Very important distinction.
And sadaqah being charity and zakat being the tax, which is incumbent at 2.5%.
So zakat is more like tax and charity, but in our context as a minority community, a nice way to think about it is like membership fees for the Muslim community in the UK.
Indeed.
Right? So the point is, when you pay membership fees to a certain club, you expect that club to make your situation as a member of that club better, right? By reinvesting the money in that club, developing the services, etc., etc. That's what zakat is supposed to do within our community. And the reality is, whether you look at education, whether you look at the issues of poverty, whether you look at all sorts of things, we are far behind in terms of infrastructure, in terms of basic provision of faith-based services within our community. There are tons of issues, in our youth issues, all sorts. The fact that elderly Muslims are abandoned, there's not really any kind of decent provision for them. If we were to pool our zakat in the UK, we would be generating hundreds of millions of pounds a year, and if we were to reinvest that within our community, it would just do so much.
But the question is, what is home?
Right, and I think that most of your viewers will be quite clear about where home is. Home is London, Birmingham, Manchester, Bradford, Leeds, etc., etc. That is home. That's where they've grown up. That's where they've lived. That's where they're going to, get married. That's where they're going to have kids.
Right.
That's where they're going to work. That is home.
So you still actually accept charity though as well, apart from zakat?
So any non-zakat funds we receive, we use it to support the backbone of National Zakat Foundation.
Indeed, indeed. Appreciate your time.
Oh, thank you.
Hold up, please.
Thank you. Thank you.
Should we give to the National Zakat Foundation, which is a company, charity. It's gonna make you look bad, man. This guy's getting money, man. Making profits. We have, for example, is that an issue?